Yes, so I'm interested in how this particular conversation has come about, because we could talk about education, which is a massive topic, and we could go off in all sorts of directions. But I think what sparked it was last time we were talking about the role of education in emergence and how education affects how emergence happens. Um, so I guess that's the kind of context for the next half an hour or however long, is to explore that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, the context was also control, because we were looking about this human need for control, and where that came about and how that was reinforced in education,
Yeah.
or even taught in education.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, interestingly, this actually came up for me in the seminar I did yesterday around engagement and culture change. And we were talking about resistance to change. And one of the factors that somebody suggested was very significant was around fear. And where did that fear come from? So it was actually around at school having the fear of getting it wrong, of not getting the right answer. Which hampered emergence, because people wouldn't try and experiment because they were frightened that whatever they came up with, they would be told, no, that's the wrong answer. So yeah, why is that? Why does the education system do that? And why do people in education continue to look for the one right answer? When did it start? You know, how did it emerge in our education system in the first place? So that'd be quite interesting to explore that. Why is it that education, as Ken Robinson said, why is it that it destroys creativity?
so I've experienced education in different cultural settings, and very often when we're talking about education, in the kind of context that you were just talking about, Brett, we're really looking at the British concept of education, which was developed specifically less for because the Europeans are much more focused on developing as a human being, whereas British are much more focused on making people able to follow instructions and execute them. So it's much more of a training mindset, and that's pervaded the whole Western world, certainly the Anglo-Saxon world, which is now, of course, totally counterproductive to what we need. But it's also pervaded a lot of the European world, because the same principle, but it's not the case that it's just been a linear. This is when it started, and it's gone from there. There's been all kinds of different variations. I'll stop there because that's not leading anywhere. But
but it led me somewhere from as well, because I did want to tag onto that. I do believe like the school system that we're still using, and is very similar in Germany as well, is to conform people, just to, as you said, like make them follow rules and sort of like differentiate right from wrong, and there's only one right and one wrong, or well, maybe one right and many wrongs. And I think I believe it started with the Industrial Revolution. I'm not 100% sure, but as you said, there might have been like a few different starting points. But I think then that's when there, was a need for a workforce, and there was always a need for a future workforce, and they had to sort of be educated, not so much in particular topics, but I think, yeah, in following rules, etc. And you saying that it's not really what we need anymore, then led me to another thought that I had before as well. It's interesting that in school we have this one size, well, it doesn't fit all, but we still use it, this one size system. And then when people get into the workforce, particularly, in offices, etc., we're then looking for like more individual training solutions, sort of like retraining everyone to become more individual and, work sort of like within their own capacity, I'd say. So I think that's still fairly recent, I guess, within the last, well, few decades, I'd say. But I do find it interesting that no one really seems to want to do the same thing for education, being more individual within the school. I'm sure there are schools who do it. I'm sure there are teachers who do it, but just having a more individualistic approach. I think Finland is a really good example for a good education system. I don't know a lot about it, but the 2 points that I remember from looking at it, because so me being from East Germany, for some reason the East German education system and the West German education system also used to be different. I don't know how, because when I came into school, the wall had already come down, and I know I digress a little bit, but I think it was compared to the Finnish education system. And in Finland, I think that, so there's no private or public schools. The wealthy people actually invest into the school system because they obviously want their own children to be educated quite well, which then in turn sort of like is good for everyone included. But they also pay their teachers quite well. So I think if you have a well-paid workforce that educates your children, it might lead to a more broad education, to a more individualistic approach to smaller, classes, etc. And I'm going to stop there because now this doesn't lead me anywhere, but maybe someone else.
Yeah, well, I can certainly pick up on the Finnish system, because my understanding of the Finnish education system is that they don't start school proper until they're about 8 years old. So they're given much more time. And this actually relates to the neurological development and neuroplasticity, the development stages that they go through. We're actually trying to teach them stuff when they're too young, trying to teach them sort of maths and things like that at a time when they haven't had the opportunity to kind of develop their worldview. And so there's no real context to the learning. It's just facts and figures, and it doesn't mean a lot. Whereas when they've had 8 years of play and experimentation, so that they would go to nursery or kindergarten or whatever, and so they'd be learning social skills and relationships. They'd be learning stuff about the world and their place in the world, and then they'd start the sort of formal part of education, and they've got a context for it, and I think that probably really helps. Yeah, and there's all sorts of things that lead on from that, but be interested to hear what Joanna has to say, what her thoughts are on this so far.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. I would like to concentrate on the outcomes, like what education is producing now, because it's more production than really upbringing or supporting. This is mental health. Depression is one of the main causes, if not the main cause of disability now. The scientists also measured how teens are feeling in the US schools. And it was like about 42% feel down, which is like every one of us feel down, but they are like more permanently feeling down and meaningless. And what else? The youth feels the great division we are having. This is something that Bianca said, remember today. This is something we are just facing in my country, in Poland, with a president election. So young people decided on votes now. They decided. They are anti-establishment. They don't believe media. They don't believe government. They are lost. And system is more constraining. The copy-paste school, yeah, download, upload, download. This is what is expected from youth and children. We are having then workforce, people coming working, that are asking, what should I do? How should I do it? And my experience as a lecturer on several universities on different topics, on marketing, on business psychology, was I was taking students outside. We were sitting on the grass, literally, or going to the beach, and we were sitting, sipping water and discussing, no PowerPoint presentation, and enabling kids to think by themselves, to believe in themselves, not like, okay, it's not possible, I will not even try. Will lead them to find out what they love and get any knowledge we want them to get. And any knowledge not we want them to get because we are wrong here, we need to admit, yeah, as this generation. It's more like they will catch what's needed for them in their life. But what we can do is encourage them, show them how to do it, show them meditation, show how to reflect, show how to be together on a deeper level. So summarizing, we have a flat society with no soul, soulless, divided, fragmented. And this disconnection, because collective intelligence, but also collective being is rising up. So the new generation is like not even smarter, they're like deeper. Means they sense like, what's going on? I don't fit here. I don't want to be here. I don't belong. I don't know how they are really functioning, existing 3D while I'm 4D and I know it. Where is this another D? What to do it, how to gain it? And they are hyper connected with technology, but disconnected with soul. I would put this diagnosis on the table.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Really, for me, the distinction there is one between teaching. I mean, we were talking before about what we're teaching. Well, my question is, well, why the hell are we teaching in the first place? Why teach? We don't need to speak to people, but what we do need to do is help kids, people develop, discover, find out for themselves, show them ways they can discover and learn, and which is what Joanna has just been describing, I think.
Inquiry, yeah, inquiry.
Inquiry, yeah, and yet most of the focus on traditional education has been on teaching. We talk of teachers. We don't talk of learning facilitators or something, or another term. It's centered, and of course, the roots. Well, they do industrialization, that does have as part of the root, but there are another part of the roots, and particularly the British system, is that of colonialism, because what the British then needed back in when the colonial empire grew were people who could go out to those remote places and control those places, administer them in a united way, in a unified way, so that wherever they went, it was the same system that was being used. So you needed people who could follow orders and could follow a particular way of doing things, and it worked very well at the time. But we're way beyond that, and yet we're still living in a colonial system, basically. And that's a key problem. And one other thing I wanted to mention is I've been following the work of Theo Dawson, who, well, without going into the detail, but she's developed a way of looking at how groups of people can learn to coordinate things in a way that we don't when we're learning individually. But the fundamentally what she was originally a midwife, and she's now went to Harvard and there's a PhD in all of it. But she started off as a midwife, and what got her going to that was her observation that once kids reach at the age of 6, the magical age of 6, they seem to lose their sense of curiosity, and they never, to a large degree, most of them never do, because most adults are not that curious. They just do what they're told, or they follow orders. They do their jobs and so on. They're not really curious, and we're constantly discouraged to be curious. If you, I've been in workplaces where they've seen something that's not quite right, and they say, "Oh, well, we could do this in a different way, and it would work much smoother." So they suggested it, and the colleagues were fine. But then it went to the manager, and the manager put it down. Eventually, it turned that person into a troublemaker. Suddenly, that person who was doing for the purpose of the organization is a troublemaker in the organization. And so, of course, in that sort of setting, people then stop making suggestions, and they stop being curious. They just do what they're told, and so it's a perpetuating system. And of course, now in our current age, we're trying to get out of that mode, but we're still very much stuck in that sort of mindset, which is why it's interesting that the younger generation, who were not necessarily brought up quite to the same extreme, are approaching it with a different mindset, which is so welcome. But the focus really should be on the learners, not on the teachers. Just like it should be on the employees, not on the leaders. It's the same problem.
So from that, I take the age of 6. They've been in education for a year, and by that time, they've been going through that process, as you suggest, Francois, where they come up with ideas and they're told, no, that's wrong, this is the right answer, and they give up asking the questions. So that was my problem at school. The number of times I was told off for asking stupid questions. It's like, I mean, we have this saying, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only the questions you don't ask are stupid. Yeah, and I think there are two aspects to the way that education can be demoralizing, and that is certainly one of them, and that's probably the one which stifles emergence most, is the fact that they're taught there's one answer, they're taught that they need to control things, they learn control because they're being controlled, which isn't healthy, and it's something that I certainly didn't respond to at school. But then there's also this other thing about having their self-worth constantly undermined, and it gets worse as they go through the system. Joanna was saying about how many school children are depressed because they can't get their grades, and they're under pressure all the time from parents and teachers to get their grades, as if it matters. I graduated from school with extremely mediocre results. I wasn't good enough to get into university because I just didn't pay attention to the stuff that I thought was rubbish. But actually being good at the rubbish is what you needed in order to succeed. And so I survived 15 years of education and came out of it quite badly scarred. I think it did actual damage, and it took me a lifetime to recover from it. So, but the good thing is that I didn't let them knock it out of me. But I always observed with horror the way that teaching was disabling the students, my fellow pupils, and how they were being taught not to question, which I thought was the most important thing, was to question everything. But that's what always got me into trouble. So how can we create an environment where we actually expect that of children? We expect them to ask difficult questions and to open up exploration and inquiry. I'm not sure how we do that within the current system, but it's got to be possible.
My observation from alternative education, which I was attending, and the two of my daughters, is that they are absolutely aware of the 4Ds, and they see 4D, they sense it, but they feel lost around. They are not prepared to be. They're not prepared to be in this system, and this is why they get depressed, because this is like, hello guys, hi, hello, and there's silence around. You know what I'm saying? So from my perspective, being enabler for youth, children, just letting them be and build trust to themselves that the answers are inside, so they can relate to themselves, so they can reach out for help, they can reach out for conversation, and that is okay and not pacified like you mentioned, like bad boy. That is what's happening, because I also understand teachers, they are also aware what's going on, but they are expected to deliver it this way. They have a script, they have curriculum, and they need to go and deliver it. And I know also brave teachers and lecturers that are saying, no, I will take like 1/4. Last week I was discussing it with my friend who is also a lecturer. Like, I'm doing 1/4 of the class with what's needed, and the rest is for us, is the space for us. So helping youth to trust in this process is everything. And we are still not yet there. I don't know any space that will be this deep. It's rather like, yeah, let's talk about emotions, and from my perspective is a kindergarten of being. Yeah, let's talk and admit our emotions, and let's learn how to deal with this. Like, we are like, hello, we are not animals, hello, we are not programmed, we can do more. So solution is there, and it will come in emergent way. It's about us putting stream of consciousness in this direction, nothing more or less. And youth sees more, because they tell us like, hey, parents, look, the environment is in danger. Oh, really? Let's buy some plastic cup, let's do this. And we are doing this. We're also not present with what's there. So it's good to learn from children, and actually more, as Francois, you mentioned, it's about conversation. It's about inquiry. It's not about telling them what to do, because our knowledge and whatever is obsolete. We could concentrate on wisdom, ancient wisdom, say, study it, check it. Does it fit? Does it make a difference? But the knowledge, and why it's so divided again, why math is not the same as chemistry, and then you are going to interdisciplinary studies because you want to do math with biology. Oh my God, this is something special. No, this is life. Thanks.
This reminds me of a really beautiful scene in a TV series called The Wire. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. It's a really good series. It's not about teachers or anything, but there's a scene in it where a new teacher, so his class is just full of very, very poor people, like the children are, come from poor families. And he's trying to help them to teach them. I think he teaches maths or something. And he sees that some kids just learn differently, and he figures out how to help them. However, he's not allowed to do that, because I mean the way it works in the US, and it might be very similar in European countries, is if they don't get certain results, if his class doesn't get certain results in the tests, like they don't get funding or something like that. It's all interconnected. So, you know, Francois, what you said, it's because we live in this system, in this colonial system still. There doesn't seem to be much we can really do, and I'm really trying to go with the flow, with emergence, etc. However, I'm a very impatient person as well. I want things to change for the better right now, right here. And I know, you know, that's not possible, but it's sort of like this. I mean, I can go off on a tangent, like I think we all are, because education is such a massive, massive topic. But I think if the system within like, or which within education exists doesn't change, it feels like the education system itself is not really going to make a massive difference. With, let's say we change education like from today to tomorrow, that everyone, you know, follows their dreams and this and that. If they then go out into a workforce system that doesn't accommodate that, do you know what I mean? Like, is education like, or how can we start changing the educational system, and then from within change that bigger system within it exists? That's my current thought process. I don't know if it makes any sense. But I want it to change now, so that's.
I love that thought, Kat. Yeah, of creating an education system that the output is people who are themselves and different and respected for their differences, and don't accept traditional ways of doing things. Can you imagine if everybody was like that? The command and control, the massive organizations that rely on directives and making people do what they want them to do, they wouldn't be able to function. They would have to change, because, you know, nobody, you know, it would be what they call anarchy. Nobody obeying orders and doing their own things. And what I observed in the large organizations I worked in was when I did my own thing, when I went against the rules, we got much better results. So actually it's good for the company for people not to obey the rules, to do their own thing, to use their initiative, despite the best efforts of the senior leadership team to keep them under control and make sure that they're not going off on different tangents. Just let them see what happens, see what emerges. So I think, yeah, the role of education in that is fundamental. And the fact that at the moment the output is very much at odds with what we need helps to perpetuate the current reality and makes it harder for organizations that want to change, because even within that, people are uncomfortable. One of the things we were talking about yesterday was that when we say people will rise to the challenge, well, not everyone does. And I think the reason for that is that a lot of people find it hard to overcome their conditioning. I don't think it's that they're inherently not able to contribute. And so I think, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation so far is that perhaps we can't fix the education system, but maybe we just need to understand that when people come out of that system, the way that they are, the way they behave, the way that they think is not really who they are. It's who they've been trained to be. And so when we see that disconnect between who they are being and who they want to be, or who they would naturally be, which creates that discomfort and the need to protect themselves by acting out a role. I think if we can understand that that is their life and that is their experience, that's what they're going through, rather than taking them at face value and saying, oh, right, well, they're no good, they can't do this, they can't do that, because you know, that's how they are. But just kind of stepping back and saying, well, actually, everybody has hidden talents, hidden depths that they've never really been given the opportunity to explore. And sometimes they are uncomfortable about exploring because they're expecting, well, in my day, you get a slap across the back of the hand with a ruler from the teacher. Of course, they don't do that now, but it still feels like it when you're given that negative feedback. So understanding the difficulty of them coming out of that comfort zone, and therefore appreciating their potential, valuing their potential, and helping them step by step to step into themselves more fully. I think that's perhaps all we can do, and perhaps that's the best thing we can do. I don't know. Joanna, what do you think?
Francois, maybe you have something to say.
Well,
Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you, Brett,
I-
for pointing me out. Yes, I have my thoughts also.
well, I would just go to say that ultimately we train people, managers, for example, to manage people. And so when something goes wrong, it's always the people's fault, and you need to retrain them, and reprimand, and so on. And yet, most undesired outcomes are due to the system, not to the people. So Edward Deming, he said that 95% of problems are due to the system, not to the people, and therefore we're totally taking the wrong approach if we keep putting our focus on managing people. Managers should be managing the system and getting the system right, and so on. And so we do need to work on this on a system, but the system is so massive and so huge that it's a daunting task. And if you start asking me about it, then I'm going to not finish talking. So I better not get into that and let Joanna finish, have a final word, because we're also running a bit short of time.
I will be very positive and optimistic here. I believe we can do a lot. First of all, we can be a source if we are capable, but at least believing in ourselves to some extent we can be a source. We can be a role modeling. And from my perspective, there's this famous unlearning that Francois is mentioning many times, and the podcast was also with you, Francois, about unlearning. I believe it's not the fastest part relating to cats who wants the fast solutions. Why? Because unlearning should be a conscious, as I understand it, of course, it should be a conscious process of, putting ourselves back. So actually we're in point zero. Not necessarily, but yes, unlearning is partially, but being able to see a lesson from what we experienced is very important. And my experience is telling me, when you are bringing this trust, energy, space to the room, suddenly people forget they have all constraints. Suddenly they're trust. Suddenly they are saying because they feel safe. And about safe cats, you were telling many times how feeling on perception of safeness, being safe is important. I don't know if safeness is existing as a word, but no, it does. And this is possible because we are able to connect on a human level. I'm saying on an existence level immediately. And all constraints or problems, limitations, beliefs, social consensus, whatever you say, it's gone. Because you have this direct channel of communication, because you generate it. And it's again not me generated. It's us that we allowed trust to come into the room. And seeing people with the whole dimensions we are able to see is something we can offer. And it's not, again, imposing our experience, which is outdated already and which is subject to now. So yeah, you know what I wanted to say, with this individual from our level, but opening and showing them, yes, you can, you have everything you need. And this feeling that they will feel there is what education, and I would get rid of this name happily, education could bring. This feeling of potential, this feeling on connection, this feeling of it's about me to reach for solution. I can do it. There are plenty of possibilities out there. I'm just limiting myself. It's about me. It's not about the world outside. But it's not, again, about me. It's about, and I'm accepting me as I am now, and I'm today. So giving this construct that will work and will be living in people, and this feeling of feeling good, that yes, it is possible, is what we can have. Because why? They will search for it for a lifetime. They will never forget this feeling, and they will look for it for a lifetime. This is what happened with me, and I know can happen with students on the one lecture.
I just wanted to, add on to Joanna's very beautiful last words. And one thing that you said, Brett, about helping people to find themselves after surviving the education system. And just remember that, I think I wanted to be a teacher when I was young, and there's obviously a lot of, young girls and boys who want to be firefighters and all of these doctors and vets and all of these beautiful jobs. No one, I'm pretty sure, ever said, oh, I want to, be an account manager or a finance director or something. So it's just a beautiful thought for me to help these people to just finding themselves again in their dreams, and then connect with these dreams and live their most beautiful lives.
Yeah, that's lovely, Kat. I'd just like to share one of the stories that Ken Robinson used to tell about exactly that. And there was a young kid at school, really bright young boy, and he wanted to be a firefighter. And all the teachers said, no, you're far too intelligent for that. You should go to university and do this and do that. But he stuck to his dream and became a firefighter. And then one of the teachers had a fire at his home, and it was the young kid who came and actually saved their home. Yeah. So I thought that was a beautiful example of, people following their dreams, doing what they love best. It is the way to achieve the best outcome for everyone.
Beautiful ending. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the GoFish Podcast. We hope you found it interesting and useful. If you'd like to know more, please subscribe on our website at gofishcollective.com and also follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you.